Bob Reynolds. Okay, I'm Bob Reynolds. I'm a professor of computer science at in College of Engineering here at Wayne State. I've been engaged in AI for several decades, and I've seen a lot of changes in AI. The ideas that of AI haven't changed in a while. However, the technology to support the ideas and working with the ideas has changed remarkably, especially in the last decade. And so it's exciting to see that happening. I would just say, personal experience. I've been teaching AI in computer science for a number of years at the undergrad and the grad level, and there's always a limit on you have to have a certain number of individuals to be in the class, and so it would often turn out I would have to go out and pull people in from the hall saying, come into this class in order to get it to run. These days, I have to tell people there's no more room. So it's amazing how things have sort of turned around. It's exciting to see people interested in the things that I've been interested in for quite some time. So as far as the history of at Wayne State, um, we the CNIT went in partnership with um, Google to produce a software, a version of ChatGPT called WarriorGPT, and that version has been tailored to the needs of teaching. It's available on Canvas for classes. It went into operation in the fall. There was a group of about 32 different instructors who signed up to use it. They the end of the the year, they did do a survey and sort of got the feedback from the people using it in terms of the good and the bad and the ugly about its use. Um, um, so as part of that, the Academic Senate, which is the top level governing body for uh, the faculty at the university, decided that it was important to have a committee that looked at and monitored how AI was being integrated into the the school and classroom and the technology that was being used. So that was formed actually over a year ago. And I was one of the people who was on board. We have people about eight faculty from all over campus: the medical school, business school, engineering, uh, the class, social sciences. So it's a diverse set of opinions on AI and its use. So we've been working for about diligently for over a year, and we produced, for example, some changes or suggested changes to the student code of conduct that incorporates AI issues into the student code of conduct specifically. We've also produced some templates for instructors to use as part of their courses, um, their course syllabi, to so give students a better idea of what the instructors allow and what they don't allow. As you can imagine, there's a wide spectrum of different approaches to using it. Some instructors forbid it, won't allow students to use it. Others encourage it as much as possible. Given that I teach the AI classes and I teach game programming, uh, I encourage students to use it. In fact, in terms of game programming, programming design, they're becoming very powerful tools for use, and so it's important to get my students to be aware of that. So for me, it's a no-brainer. But for others, it's sort of uh, it's a two-edged sword. On the one hand, there's some advantages. On the other, there are disadvantages. As far as the current Warrior GPT, as far as I know, if you're in a class, your instructor can give you access to a Warrior GPT or not. Um, but Warrior GPT is interesting because unlike the uh, the external versions, the session, it has no memory of the session once the session ends. So when the session is over, everything you've done is effectively lost. So it's important to make sure that you save all of that. Also, it turns out that if you are allowed to go on, you can go into your settings and on tools, and you can change some of the parameters. And so you can change parameters for your session. Again, when your session is gone, all of these parameters go back to default. So you can't, you have to reset them every time. But the basic parameters are one, the length of the response in terms of the number of characters, number of words that can be produced. Right now, the default is, I think, 50, which is not a lot, but you can extend it to more than that. Also, there are two other parameters, one relating to the diversity of the response. In other words, ChatGPT was set up to produce multiple answers. The idea is every time you give a query, you'll probably get a different answer. And that's the way it's designed. It's designed to give you an answer, but not necessarily the best answer or the right answer. It gives you an answer. Okay, and and even in a situation where the answer is not precise, or in fact it could be a hallucination, it is doing what it's told to do. It's giving you an answer. But if you don't like it, you can try again. So um, so one of the parameters is how many diverse answers do you want? How much diversity do you want in your responses? And the other one is keywords. If there are certain keywords that are important, you can tell ChatGPT, focus in on these keywords, make sure that these are given higher weight in your search. So that's that's the other thing. And one other kind of, again, the double-edged sword, there's two ways that you can sort of look at using Warrior GPT or any of these systems. Is one faculty said it's really autofill. You ask for something and you get something filling the blank. On the other hand, you have an opportunity to use it in a creative way. And it's that creative way that, of course, I try to encourage my students to do and teach them how to do it. So it's and well, that's basically uh, my 5 minutes. But I could go on as
Perfect.
okay.
I'm sure we will in a few minutes. Mr. Spencer.
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Spencer. I'm a Senior Director of Product Management at Wiley. And as Sarah said, I've been in the business for a little over 20 years, and most of that time was spent in research publishing at Wiley. I've been working in the AI space for probably close to 15 years, back before it was really called AI and it was a machine learning thing. We were using that in our applications for recommending content and other similar use cases. And then for the last 8 years, I was in a team that was building a submission system for scientific authors to submit their work for consideration in publishing. And this entire platform has a lot of AI built into it, from checks that happen at the beginning, turning unstructured manuscripts into structured data that we can use inside of our systems to track the publication and production processes, screening technologies that evaluate papers that come back in and looking for problems like verifying author identity, or looking for weird connections between authors and peer reviewers, things like that we want to try to avoid to keep the scientific record clean. And then most recently, in the last year, I've moved into a new group in Wiley called AI Services that is dedicated to understanding AI and finding applications for AI at our company. My team works in a fairly creative area where we're working on using AI primarily to create derivative works of content. So we're doing things like translations and taking multiple reference works and turning them into smaller digest versions, changing the reading level of one thing to another. Usually that's making something simpler and more approachable. But we're also using AI in many, many different ways. And AI ethics is a really hot topic at Wiley. It's something that we feel very passionate about. At the end of the session, this is very good timing because Wiley's just finished conducting a fairly large research, original research about AI use in research and scientific publishing. And I'll put a link up at the end. It has some QR codes where you can access that research if you like. But it was almost 5,000 researchers telling us about their views on AI use in publishing, how they're using it today, how they anticipate using it tomorrow, and some opinions about where they're struggling. So it's a really interesting report. It's very timely, and I'm going to probably be drawing on some of the information from that report throughout the panel.
Awesome, thank you. So now we're getting to our discussion part of the panel. I have about 6 questions to start us off, but I invite our audience to please drop into the chat any questions you already have, or from our discussion, any questions that kind of pop up. So my first question for our panel is, how well does AI integrate into scientific writing? I say this as someone who is writing her dissertation right now, / trying to move to publication in a couple months. And ChatGPT for me sometimes gives okay answers, and sometimes is just better at writing outlines.
Well, I'll jump right into that one because I think that not only does it integrate well, it's almost inseparable at this point. I think if you're not using AI on some level, you're missing out. But how you use AI, I think, is the really important factor. Because it's everything from Grammarly and outlines to you could even use AI to generate, fictitious research from scratch. We know because we do it all the time to test our systems. And it can produce a fairly believable paper until you start running it against our checks.
I would I'd add I'd agree with that. One of the things that I particularly encourage my students to do is to effectively use it to, if there's a challenge or a problem given, to sort of have it come back and provide sort of a framework for addressing that challenge in terms of the number of dimensions. And as part of that, ask them to be precise in terms of literature review. In other words, what what sources are you using to produce this? So hypothesis generation, literature review, data and analysis is also something that the generative AI can do. And I know I have a number of my students who are using generative AI to analyze some of the simulation results that we produce to get a bigger picture of what's going on. And that's another thing. And then writing assistance, as Gary was saying, is important. One of the interesting things is that I'm a reviewer and an editor on a number of journals, and it used to be for a special issue or for a conference, you would get 3 or 4 papers to review. And one of them would really be an outstanding paper, and then on the other end there'd be one with major league grammar issues that might be interesting, but you just can't get your head around it. These days,
pick out the science from the poor grammar.
Exactly. And then you would end up rejecting it. These days, I don't get any of those papers anymore. I get a paper that's cleaned up, and I can see AI behind the scenes, scrubbing and polishing, and therefore, and Gary hit it on the nose. Now I can see the science. I can't just throw it away and say, well, I'm not going to deal with it. I have to now look at the science and see what's there and what's meaningful. So it allows me to sort of get rid of the superficial things that are sort of clouding my vision. And
Mhm.
that's very important to me as a reviewer, for sure. I like
And I
that.
So
think it really opens up the diversity of the scientific community because there are plenty of researchers where English is not their first language. And one of, I think, the best uses of AI at the moment in science is cleaning up that first pass of somebody who wasn't a native English speaker and getting that paper to the point where an editor like you is going to actually read it for the science and not reject it
Exactly.
because of the poor grammar.
Yeah. And one other thing is just sort of a convenient thing is that different publishers, different journals have different formats for citations, which are a big, and another, you look at a paper and you'll see, you go down, first thing I'll do in a paper, I'll go to the bibliography and look at the citations. And in the past, I'd always be able to find several different species of citations sort of lurking around. These days, not so much, because you can use the AI to transform citations and from one format into another. And again, that makes it easier to tie the paper into the rest of the world. And again, the science becomes more important. The network becomes more important than, just whether there's a period here or not.
Right.
So this is really interesting because I think a lot of times, especially students, don't consider things like citation generators or, Grammarly as AI assistants. So to me, I kind of think of Grammarly as like the extension of what spell check used to be.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if, like, on the spectrum of AI, you guys see a division of people who are like, well, Grammarly is just fine, but, you know, ChatGPT, WarriorGPT, maybe not. And I can in myself see that there are multiple camps of people along the spectrum of using AI.
Well, I think you've hit it on the head. Yeah, yeah, exactly. There is a division there. And you think about it as the early, uh, so simple, text editing that we take for granted. You misspell a word and get uh, a possible replacement gets highlighted, etc. But I have one thing, and this could be just my own opinion, but I think actually that these, the simple editing, sort of spell checking things that you do as you're typing things in have actually have kind of dumbed it down. In other words, I'll type in something I know it's clear what it should be, but the system can't figure it out. So I'm just wondering whether, in fact, sort of some of the technology or some of the smarts have been taken from sort of the low level typing aspects and moved up into the more, kind of like you were saying, the generative AI, the writing style uh, session. In other words, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Why not put it all in one place? So yeah, I think that's certainly a possibility.
Yeah, and I think there's a line between AI and generative AI, and
Mhm.
there's a little bit of a fuzzy area around. Dr. Reynolds, you made the point about it's really fancy you know auto complete, right? It's a really fancy version of that. So even when it's auto completing one word, that is the principle, like the underlying principle behind generative AI. But when you just use it for a word, that's one thing. And when you use it to generate a paragraph or an outline or a book, that's a completely different
Yeah,
animal.
I think
yeah, exactly.
this dovetails well into our next question, which is, should scientists have to disclose how and to what extent they use AI? Meaning, if I write a paper and submit it tomorrow, do I need to disclose that I use Grammarly? versus in a citation generator, or should I say, hey, actually, ChatGPT wrote all of my R code for my statistical tests? Where do you guys think there might be a line? And I understand you don't necessarily represent Wayne State or Wiley specifically on that view.
Yeah. We'll let Gary start on that one.
Sure. So I think there are a lot, like Dr. Reynolds said, there are a lot of different camps about AI usage. And there are a lot of variation in one journal to another journal or one publisher to another publisher when you start looking at the finer points of their AI policies. But there are a couple of things that everybody agrees on. The one thing is that editing, polishing tools like Grammarly, spell check, those things don't need to be disclosed at all. That's an accepted part of preparation of scientific material. But when AI starts to participate in the research, that usage needs to be disclosed. And it needs to be disclosed very transparently, usually in the methods section or the acknowledgments of your paper. And then the other thing is that publishers and journals seem to be very consistent on is that generative AI may not be listed as an author. So anything that you would want to list something for authorship, that would cause you to want to list somebody for authorship, if you're asking AI to do those things, you probably should think twice about that.
That's I I agree with everything that Gary has said. One of the basic things is, in fact, to declaring that means that that disclosing AI tools and methods ensure that other researchers can validate, replicate, and build upon your findings. And again, this gets back to the network of scholars. We don't want to sort of start. I think one of the things in the past is that we had people in the ivory towers who can't connect to the world. Now we have the ability to connect to the world, and we need to make sure that that happens. I give you an interesting story. As I had students do projects, well, basically do homework in the fall, and after one homework, several students turned in basically the same answers. And so we contacted them, and each student said, I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't talk to anybody. I did it all myself. What they did is they talked to ChatGPT and they asked the same question, the one that was in the homework, and they got the same answer. And so so the idea that that the integrity was an issue there. And so to them, it was okay because they did it on their own. But the fact that the source was, in fact, the same source, whether it's human or AI, it doesn't matter to us. That's a problem. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
other things, other issues too is biases that AI we know has biases. Some we know about, some we don't know about. And by saying that AI was contributing, then you're basically being open about the fact that there can be some biases there. And depending on the application, the reader or the editor can look more closely at that, because of course transparency is key. And if you don't know that some biases are possible, then you're not aware of that. I think the key thing is teaching students to be aware of the fact that these are just responses. It's just like if you talk to someone else, in the coffee lounge, and you ask them a question. Sometimes they'll give you an answer that makes sense. Sometimes they won't.
Mhm.
It's just like all of these things are generated in the sense that the goal is to provide an answer, not necessarily the best or the right. So what you need to do is you need to have critical thinking. The key thing is, on the one hand, you've got auto complete. On the other hand, you need to be critical in terms of responding to what you see. So knowing that AI is part of the process for an article, for a book, or for something like that is critical in order to have that perspective.
Dr. Reynolds, I think you just hit on the head one of the other questions we have, which is how do we change education at the college level to teach students about incorporating AI into the writing skill set and what kind of challenges that need to overcome? And I know you already mentioned you need to overcome, thinking critically about the answers that they receive from ChatGPT. And you've talked a little bit about your own curriculum to incorporating and inviting students to use AI. Do you think that's something that we need to pursue? And I say we, I mean academia, to pursue so students can become better writers and, if they move into the ivory tower, perhaps they are able to write at like the publishing level?
For me, I use AI as an assistant, not a replacement. So
Mhm.
I use it to assist me in tasks that sort of get the ball rolling. If I have a new assignment to do, I can ask the AI, can you give me a sort of an overview of the task? And or can you give me a review of the current literature in this area? Sort of a get the ball rolling. Often that's the hardest thing is sort of put your foot in the water. This is kind of this is an interesting story. I don't know if I should. Well, I was asked to produce this statement on AI in for the university, and as a member of the academic senate and on the committee. So what did I do? First thing I did is I asked ChatGPT, what would your state, what would you say about the impact of AI on the university? And it came back and it said a couple of things that, down in the trenches. Yeah, yeah. But there were things that I hadn't thought about at scale at the university level that I hadn't thought about. And then I began to say, oh, gee, I can see how I can shape this to include not just me, but the rest of the university. So I think of it as it's an assistant to me. It's not a replacement for a GRA or a GTA. It just helps. And what we need to do is teach students how AI generated text potential potentially biases and the importance of verifying what you get as an answer all of the time. Be aware. Awareness is key. Uh, um, Another thing is that I teach in my classes this term, for example, we're doing prompt engineering. Basically, asking a question to a chat GPT is a prompt. You're prompting it to give a response. Um, to get a really good answer, especially if you're dealing with a design question. In fact, one of the assignments they have right now is to design a game, and I give them these are the things that this game should have. But you can't just give it all into one big question. What you need to do is to structure it, to step into the design, uh, ask one question, then get a response, and then focus in on part of the response and ask another. So have a structured sequence of prompts. So prompt engineering is becoming a very important issue, and students should be aware of the fact that you just can't get a good answer just with one prompt unless it's an answer, a very trivial one. But if you're dealing with something like design or creation, this prompt engineering is key. So I use it in my AI class. I use it in my game design class, uh, and but you've got to use it. Again, in other words, think of it this way: is that it's a way of representing the reasoning process, the stepwise process that goes into reasoning about and producing a design. And so let's see, anything else? Um, um, well, and the other thing is, yeah, hands-on practice. It's easy for me to say
Yeah.
that, but in class, what we do and I give them assignments. I say, here, I want you to design a version of Angry Birds. Or right now it's Zork. I don't know if anybody knows Zork. Zork was one of the early games back in the
Adventure.
late 60s. Zork, yeah, Zork. And then the last week we did Snake, which you can still see on YouTube, the snake game. So I asked them to do that, and you just can't do that in one question. What you have to do is to break the problem down. You have to decide what are the components, and then ask about the components. So so when you start dealing with prompt engineering, you're talking about reasoning process, and that's more than just the as Gary was saying. That goes way beyond the autofill. But to be
For sure.
creative, you've got to, and I think that these systems have support at a high level for creation, but you have to take advantage of it. Whew.
I think you said something really interesting that I'm not going to disagree with, but I am going to give you an alternate view about prompt engineering in particular. I completely agree. To get a really good answer, especially on a complicated question, prompt engineering is very, very important. But new reasoning models like O3 or DeepSeek, these reasoning models, they kind of build that in, and you can ask a pretty boring, like a pretty obtuse question, and the reasoning model can do a surprisingly good job at trying to figure out what you mean. And we were just doing a little bit of research on one of our products, which is an internal, it sounds sort of like your WarriorGPT. It's the same kind of thing. It's an internal siloed LLM inside of our company. And my team is producing this application. And we go through and analyze the traces that come through, looking for, drift on our models and, problems that users might have. And one of our chief engineers was showing me a list. He's like, it's so amazing how good GPT is. That's one of the models that we use. How good GPT is at understanding these very vague prompts. Like, we have employees all over the world, and sometimes they'll put in a really short, the English is not their first language, kind of make this better prompt. And then the model is able to actually figure out what they're trying to get at and solve that problem. So I agree, today prompt engineering is very important, but I do think that is changing, and the models are getting better and better at trying to intuit what you're talking about. And then,
No.
yeah, no, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. You're on. It's great. I like it.
Well, the other thing that I think is interesting about all of this is the way you can get when you start stepwising a prompt, right? And I think this is where you were going, Dr. Reynolds, is that you start giving it step 1, do this, step 2, do this, step 3, do that. You start getting a completely different level of quality out of an LLM today. The reasoning models are starting to force that, but I think that's where things are headed.
I mean, very, very, very interesting. So you've actually used a DeepSeek.
I have it personally. We do have engineers on my team that are experimenting with it.
Interesting.
There's some political and other challenges related with actually deploying DeepSeek, but it's fun for the engineers to play with.
No.
I'm
So
going to pivot us. I apologize, Dr. Reynolds. So we have a question from the audience. This is from Brendan. And I think this is specifically for you, Gary, but Dr. Reynolds just said earlier he's a reviewer, so I'm sure he has input. Brendan asks, how do you deal with a reviewer's comments accusing authors of AI? Is checking for AI the role of the reviewer or for the publisher?
That's a really good question. And I think what I'm going to give you is my opinion about this. And you're going to find different opinions at different journals and at different publishers. I think quality and integrity in science publishing is everybody who participates' responsibility. And if a peer reviewer can catch something that an editor didn't or that the publisher didn't, I think that's a net positive for science. That being said, publishers take this as a very serious responsibility. So now I have an interesting story. About a year ago, as I was starting to get into AI services, one of the things moving into a new role is a whole bunch of interviews with people across the company trying to figure out what different people are working on. And we were kind of spinning up this new AI group, and we needed to take an inventory across the company of who was doing what with AI. And one of the things that I found in the same day, I did 2 different interviews, one with a little research and development silo that was working on some really interesting technology that would help us identify when generative AI was used. We could run a paper through this system and it would give us a probability about how likely it was that generative AI was used in the paper. It would highlight potentially problematic sections of the paper, like this looks like it was generated by AI, this over here doesn't, which is very interesting. It's something as a publisher we need to know.
Yeah.
And this group was sort of presenting it as using AI is a bad thing. We need to root out all uses of AI and people trying to, get bad science into the ecosystem. This is a year ago, remember. People were a little nervous about AI then. In the same day, I had another meeting with another little R&D team. Obviously, these two teams weren't talking with each other. And they were trying to figure out how to create an AI that could write a paper. Like give it some lab notes, hook it up to your Jupyter notebook and then have the AI write the paper. And so inside the same company, with the same kind of mentality, you've got one side trying to detect any use of AI and stamp it out, and the other side trying to find a way to use AI to generate papers. So I think at the end of the day, the whole peer review thing, it comes down to transparency. If our systems detect AI in a paper, then the human editor or the human reviewers should be looking for a disclosure about AI use in that paper. And if there's a satisfactory disclosure about AI use, then it's probably fine. But if we detect AI and we don't have a disclosure, that's when that's a thing that needs to be addressed. Now, the AI detection is not perfect, but that's where humans get involved and need to dig a little bit deeper to make sure that the science is preserved.
Very, very good. One related to that is some journals prohibit AI use in a peer review. In other words, what I do is I say, okay, I'm going to use my AI to check on your AI to maintain confidentiality and human judgment, because once we give that paper to ChatGPT or WarriorGPT, it's out there. And all of a sudden, it's potentially out in the web, and it's one of the key things is you've got ideas that sort of are yours, and one needs to be careful in sort of unleashing those ideas to the world. That is one of the nice things, for example, about WarriorGPT is that you could view it as a sandbox for students. We also have an agreement with Google. In fact, we're just getting started with that on Thursday, where they have aspects of their AI suite. And that suite is set up, again, as a sandbox for research at Wayne State. So WarriorGPT is designed to use generative AI for teaching and scholarly writing on the one hand, and then the Google suite is designed to support research on the other. So we've got the double-edged sword the two different kind of approaches that are there.
I think peer review is oh, sorry, go ahead, Dr.
Oh, no, go ahead. I
think peer review is a really fascinating topic. And I asked Sarah before attendees started joining if I could ask a question of the group. I'm a product person. I have to take advantage of people to ask them questions. So I'm curious how you feel. I'd love it if you put any responses in the chat about AI-based peer review. There's some research out there. It's emergent, and there's not enough of it to really draw any real conclusions yet. But there's some research out there that suggests that AI is as good as a human peer reviewer at providing a peer review. And we've done many, many experiments along these lines. And we're in a position to see actual peer reviews on thousands and thousands of papers. And we can generate AI-powered peer reviews and compare those to the human reviews that we've gotten. We've also trained AI models to do that comparison for us and find differences at scale. And what we have found is that AI is very, very good at doing peer review. Now, it's not really peer review. And there's also a lot of controversy around the idea of having AI do peer review. But we're curious how researchers would feel if, for example, at the point of submission, we had a system that would give you an independent review of your paper before you hit the submit button and give you feedback that you're very likely to get from your first round of peer review, and an opportunity for you to revise your manuscript at that state to address that feedback and I theoretically get a much faster publication and decision and publication process based on that preemptive review. Just curious how
Yeah.
people would feel.
So I'll start talking, and if other people want to join in the chat, I'll read your opinions as well. I'll admit I'm not published yet. I was a reviewer for a very small time journal at one point. However, I do not think I would be opposed. I might welcome it a little bit because of actually something that Dr. Reynolds and Gary, you kind of alluded to. I do worry a little bit about AI with reviewers or the use of AI by reviewers, mostly because I'm afraid it takes away the blind review. Um, I think a lot of times, for my advisor and other people, they can kind of guess, especially if it's in their field, who's probably publishing this. And there could or could not be biases based on that. And so I think a pre-screening tool that helps with grammaticals or concerns about like, well, you're missing this like part of methods that you really need to flesh out some more. I think that would be helpful. Um, Raul says, no, I'm sorry, not Raul. Brendan says, similar to your comments, both reviews could be constructive. I really like the pre-screening tool. And Homan Young says, I think that would be a good initiative.
I think you touched on something, Sarah, when you said that the peer review might identify something missing from your methods. I meant to mention this earlier. I think one of the things that AI is very, very good at, and it's a great application in science, is finding what's missing. It's really, really good at that. So you give run your paper through a secure AI if you're worried about that. Run your paper through a secure AI and ask it what's missing. And you'll very likely get some interesting results from that. Rather than trying to use AI to add new things, use AI to find out what you've missed. It tends to do a very good job at highlighting things you might not have thought about.
I like what you said about a secure AI because in our initial journal panel, or in our initial journal club that this kind of blossomed out of, some of the people in the room are in labs that compete for patents and are concerned about putting a whole manuscript through, a generative AI application as they're not sure who sees it on the other, or if anyone sees it on the other end as they compete towards this patent.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you could touch a little bit more on what a secure AI might mean or is.
Well, for us, it's AI. It's publicly available models. So right now we mostly use OpenAI models. But these are OpenAI models that we have hosted on our own infrastructure. And so we're not sending anything out to OpenAI when we run our queries against this engine. It's all inside of our own infrastructure. Wiley is a big company and we can afford to do that, but not everybody can. There are some commercial secure models that are starting to emerge, and they're still out there on the internet, but you can access them through a VPN, for example, which adds some additional security. That's what we're doing. We host all of our AI in-house on our own equipment.
One of the things within Wayne State, Wayne State does a lot of work with the health, with NIH, with the healthcare, with the medical school, and one of the big issues is not only being able to identify the intellectual property, but also personal information. And so it's important that this personal information doesn't go out to the World Wide Web and is available for everyone to see. So having a sandbox that is a very important issue. So some of the choices we have here is to either have it stored locally or maybe in some sort of edge device. So it doesn't actually get out to the internet. One of the other things in terms of is this notion of a double blind. if you submit a paper, a lot of these conferences now you have to do a double blind. That's a lot of extra work. But I bet I could give my paper to an AI and the AI would say, that's Dr. Reynolds. I could, all of a sudden, I mean, you spend all this time to get a double blind, you give it to an AI, AI is going to know. I would say, I guarantee 99% of the time it's going to be able to predict this is what Reynolds does. I mean, I can ask ChatGPT about my work. It comes back, tells me about it. Hopefully good things, but
Yeah, unless
and
you're in a very, very broad discipline, that's going to be true because the universe of experts in a particular field is not usually that large.
right. In fact, actually, I find that the double blind is good for theoretical papers where you have a whole bunch of people who are kind of working in that area. But if you're doing some specific application or project oriented, the number of people participating is much narrower, and it's a lot easier to focus. So I think conferences that are sort of geared towards this double blind tend to sort of be implicitly geared towards theoretical uh, things where there are a lot of people participating and less accessible by the other. And in fact, I got a review back, and now that you say it, Gary, where the review said nothing about what was in the. I mean, I sent an extended abstract, excuse me, which is not a paper, but it's an extended abstract. And what I got back was just a list of things that wasn't there. That's all. There was nothing saying about this is interesting. It's like there everything wasn't there. And so I'm saying, hey, that person clearly threw that into a. I mean, no human has that kind of. Well, not anybody I know. That's so. I mean, that's one other issue in terms of public. We've been talking primarily about text, but one of the things that has come up here in Wayne State is that some of the photos for faculty or staff have been, in fact, photoshopped by AI, and somebody would go and say, "I didn't take that," or there's some background that like looks like they're in some nuclear reactor or something. That's and so this notion of not only text but sort of AI using to Photoshop graphs and charts and in fact data is really in some sense even more important because bottom line is what you're writing about is the more the detail.
Yeah.
So in the chat, Hominion asked, and I'm paraphrasing, asked if there's a tool that authors can use to find the best journal that fits their work. And Gary answered this in the chat a little bit, but Gary, if you could say that answer out loud, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah. So we do have. This is a really interesting question too, because we have very conflicted views internally about tools like this. We do have a tool that helps a researcher find an appropriate journal. You can go to Wiley Author Services, and there's a pretty obvious link about finding a journal. And you can put in your title and abstract, and it uses AI to kind of look at what's been published across our portfolio in the last year and find the journals that have the most similarity with the articles that were published in journals that have the most similarity with the title and abstract that you provided. The problem with that is that it only will tell you, I mean, for us, it's fine, but for you, it might not be that interesting because it's only going to tell you the best Wiley journal. It doesn't look at the entire universe of publications and tell you the best journal. There are tools like that out there, and a little bit of Googling or asking ChatGPT will get you to them. So these tools do exist. A very similar technology and a much more interesting use case from my perspective, the kind of publishing perspective, is that same technology can be used in reverse to essentially help find peer reviewers. And this is from an editorial standpoint, this is the most challenging part of scientific publishing is finding peer reviewers. It's very difficult to get people to commit to that and find the experts that have the ability and the expertise to do it. So that's where we put a lot of our energy, is in helping editors find peer reviewers using essentially the same technology.
Oh, that's very, very interesting.
Well, we have about 5 minutes left in our panel. So I want to thank our panelists, and I think Mr. Spencer wanted to share with us a little bit about the research that's going on at Wiley, and he has some questions for the audience.
Well, what I wanted to do is, I'm just, while I talk and kind of do this last little wrap up, I don't really have much to say here. But I just wanted to share these two QR codes and remind you again about this research that Wiley just did. On the left, the QR code on the left will take you straight to the report. Nature wrote an article about it just a couple of days ago. This has been kind of in the news lately. We just released this research last week. Lots of interesting things in there about how researchers are using AI today, how publishers feel about it, but it's mostly about what authors feel about research and how they're using it. A couple of interesting things from this research. Again, we surveyed almost 5,000 researchers over almost 160 countries in 60 different fields of study. 70% of the respondents looked to publishers for leadership about how they navigate the use of AI tools in science. And that is something that we take really, really seriously. And we have a whole group at Wiley that is very actively working through the feedback that we receive from authors and researchers to try to design programs that answer the questions that authors have right now. So there will be a lot more coming from Wiley around the use of AI in publishing. And then on the right-hand side, we've also recently announced AI partnerships, and we're inviting startups and other AI researchers to reach out to us for funding partnership and other kinds of support. We really want to support the use of AI responsibly in science, and we're looking for opportunities. That's a press release about that. And one of the recent examples is there's a tool called Potato that's being developed to help with researching, with scientific research using AI. And we are very, very proud to be part of the funding for Potato to help get that off the ground. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate some of the feedback about the idea of an AI-based peer reviewer. If you have any other thoughts you want to share in the chat, I'd love to see them. But just thank you for your time. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, everyone, if we could thank both Dr. Reynolds and Mr. Spencer for donating their time to Clear today, we really appreciate it. Of course, if you have anything else to say, please put it in the chat. We have like about 3 minutes left. As a reminder to all our trainees, we do have Journal Club tomorrow at 3 o'clock, where we'll be talking about our article about how we present our research in a community setting and working with the public.
Thanks,
And
everyone.
will you put the QR codes in the chat then, or?
Actually, yeah, I'll put the link to the report in the chat just
That's good.
directly. It's really messy.
I might mention a couple other things. That the Google tool, again, we're getting a suite of Google tools here at Wayne State. One of the tools they have is to look at different funding agencies and to see how they how they fit to the research that you have. So not only would you be looking, for example, journals to publish, but you like sponsorship in terms of the research that you do. And so there are tools out there to do that. And that's also important again for the scientific aspects of things. So where do you fit? Writing a big proposal, lots of bells and whistles, and sending it to a place that they turn around and just say, well, it's not appropriate. And that's just like the journal submission. You submit, but yeah, most journals these days, the role of the chief editor is to look at something comes in and say, well, this is not in our area, and throw it back out. So the chief editor would love to have an AI who could do that. Just say this is not appropriate for our journal, but I suggest another one. So in other words, suggesting alternative journals is again a nice way of tying the community together rather than saying forget it.
The product that I mentioned in my introduction, the submission system that Wiley is rolling out, there's about 500 journals that are using it now. Wiley represents almost 2,000 journals. So we're still rolling this out pretty slowly. But it does have that capability. And that if you
Fabulous.
get rejected from a journal, we use that journal finding technology to suggest other journals that might be a better fit. And there's a very easy way to just resubmit into a different journal if you don't need to make any changes to your paper.
So how do we get access to that, or is that just
It's at the journal level. So if you happen to be submitting to a journal that's using this new system, you'll get it automatically. And if you don't, you'll just have to wait until that journal starts using this new system. But Wiley's planning on rolling it out onto every journal that we use over the course of the next 12 months or so.
Oh, that's fabulous. I'll keep an eye out for that.
Awesome. Well, it is noon. Again, thank you both for joining us today. I really enjoyed this discussion. And I will be sending out the recording. I think Gary, you had asked me for the recording, so you could use segments of it at Wiley, and I'll make sure that gets out to you.
Thank you.
Otherwise, thank you very much and
Oh,
have a great day.
and Sarah, can I get a copy of the recording too? I can.
Yes, I think I'll have to send it through OneDrive because it's such a large, it will be such a large file.
Okay,
But
sounds good.
yes,
I
absolutely.
can use it in my classes. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right,
Thank you.
goodbye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for attending, everyone.